generated by YouTube. We can also be found at Google Plus, Twitter. That's about it. The reason I began this group is because I moved though I was born in Israel, I moved from the United States to Israel about 7.5 years ago, and I could not believe all the news that goes unnoticed in the United States and in the rest of the world for that matter, because I had found out when I arrived here that there were 7 years of Qassam rockets in a small town called Sderot, which I had never heard about. And so I started to write about it every time there was a Qassam rocket in Facebook. And then I started tweeting, and a friend of mine suggested to start a group. We were 37 people in the beginning. Now we're over 14,000. And we have a growing community of people sharing news about Israel. And a lot of it is news that people never even hear about. And then I started the blog, and that's part of what I do, besides many other things that I do. But as far as being a pro-Israel activist and staunch Zionist, that's what I do. And so we are hosting this discussion meeting with a wonderful panel this afternoon. And we have Chloe Simone Valdery and Jeremy Derry. And please, Chloe, if you would like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your interest in Israel and your Zionist activity.
Sure. So my name is Chloe Valdery. I'm a Zionist. I'm a student at the University of New Orleans. I'm the president of a student organization called Allies of Israel, and we promote educating students about the Israeli conflict and about Israeli and Jewish culture in general on campus. I'm also a blogger for the Times of Israel and Israel National News. I'm the assistant director of special programs for the Institute of Black Solidarity with Israel. I also am a social media manager for the Facebook group Here is Israel, which puts out videos and things like that promote the Jewish state. And I'm also a fellow at the Lawfare Project. So my work entails really working on college campuses and promoting pro-Israel sentiment among students, putting on events and things like that, and hosting speakers to try to educate students who may be unaware of what's going on in the Middle East. We're also, my colleagues and I, working on this big event called Declare Your Freedom 2.0, and it's the second annual Pro-Israel Festival, completely student-led in New Orleans. It's coming on March 30th, and it should be exciting. We're having a lot of speakers and artists come out and perform. So that's basically what I'm working on right now.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Chloe. And real quick, if you can just tell us, how did you become a Zionist? What did you find interesting about it, and what do you feel your mission is, and why?
Well, I became a Zionist. I became a self-proclaimed Zionist freshman year in college, and I did so after, in part, I was raised as a Christian, and a very atypical Christian. I was raised in the tradition of Torah and keeping the values of Torah and things like that, and observing Shabbat and the holy days and kosher dietary laws. So I sort of grew up in that culture, and I share that commonality with the Jewish people. So I've always had a fascination and a love for the Jewish people. And moreover, when I was a freshman in college, I wanted to research the Israeli conflict. I think because of that sort of tradition in my family, it just sparked within me an interest in Israel. And when I researched it, I discovered all the anti-Semitism in the Middle East and resurging in Europe, unfortunately. And so I thought that something was necessary, something had to be done to fight that.
Thank you very much, and you're doing a terrific job. I've seen a lot of things that you do, your video, your articles, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being with us it's a great feeling to know that somebody who is educated can see the light and see the truth. So I thank you very much for that.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Chloe.
Jeremy, hi.
How are you, Michelle?
I'm fantastic. Thank you very much. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, Jeremy.
Sure. Well, first, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invite. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure to have you here.
I'm very glad to actually hear and see you guys, at least in the media world. And yeah, you know, I've been involved for roughly 6 years in pro-Israel advocacy. I used to work in the Knesset as a parliamentary assistant to Ayub Kara, the Likud minister of Druze from the north. I was involved as a guest speaker with the David Project in the States in Boston to teach college students how to fight for Israel. I've been involved with the Ministry of Hasbara doing pro-Israel work in both English and French because I lived in France for half my life. And even on Facebook, I have about 7 groups, about 10,000 members altogether. And I'm constantly updating with pro-Israel news and updates. I'm actively involved with going to different events around the country. Right now I'm based in Jerusalem. By the way, anyone can feel free to add me on Facebook. I'll send you the groups, whatever information you want about me. I write a little bit on Times of Israel, and go on connection to the pro-Jewish world, let me know. And like I said, I hope you guys enjoy this very thoughtful and engaging debate.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeremy. I'm sorry? Chloe, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, very well.
Yeah.
Let's begin our discussion. I wanted to touch on 5 topics. Let's see if we have enough time to go through them. If not, we can always do another one of these discussions and cover some other topics. But of course, the hot topic right now is the Kerry peace proposal.
Well, I think first of all, I find the proposal to be in principle unjust because its premise posits that Jews must abrogate their civil rights in certain parts of Israel, which I find, I think that's unethical. But then, moreover, they must abrogate their civil rights in parts of Israel, meaning they can't live in certain parts of Israel, they can't work in certain parts of Israel. They must abrogate their civil rights in order to make peace with an organization that hates Jews. And I find that fatuous. So I just want to start by saying that in principle, I just find it unjust and unethical. But in terms of practicality, I'd say I don't think it can work because I think it's bereft of all knowledge of the facts on the ground. I think it doesn't take into account the intransigence of the PA. They have no intent. They have no intention to make peace with Israel. The PA has no desire to work for sort of a neutral attitude amongst the Arabs towards the Jews, let alone a philo-Semitic one. And I think there are 2 reasons why. Number one, Abbas has no mandate to really foster sort of a culture of neutrality towards Israel, because he celebrated, I think, what was it, his 10-year anniversary of his 4-year term or something like that. So he's a soft tyrant. He has no mandate to serve or to even represent his people in the territories in question. And even if he wanted to make peace with Israel, he couldn't because he fosters this sort of environment of anti-Semitism. He resides over a government that promotes anti-Semitism, so he can't go back after promoting anti-Semitism and promoting Jew hatred and say, "Oh, I'm going to try to make peace with Jews." It would be political and literal suicide. So I think that the peace proposal is bound to fail for those reasons. But also, I think it doesn't take into account the external parties that do affect the conflict, like the NGOs that are anti-Israel, both unfortunately and tragically in Israel, but also in Europe, and also unfortunately, in America to a certain degree. It doesn't take into account the effect of the UNRWA in certain Arab countries that foster a sentiment and a sort of, I guess you could say, welfare states of Palestinian Arabs in those countries that are not allowed to be integrated into like Lebanese and Jordanian society because the UNRWA fosters that, and it essentially precludes integration into that society. So you have all of these external factors that aren't being addressed by the Kerry proposal, and so because of all those reasons, I don't think it will work.
I see. And have you been to Israel?
Yes, I've been 3 times.
3 times. Did you ever get a chance to go anywhere near Judea and Samaria?
Yes, I've been to the Shomron and Shiloh and Hebron. So I've been in many places in Judea and
Samaria. What center? What do you feel like? What do you feel is the problem over there with regards to the attitudes towards the Jewish people who live there?
Well, I think I don't know. There's this weird notion. I think that most normal people would say that if you deny someone the right to live in a certain area of land based on their ethnicity or based on their culture or their ethnic background, I think most people would acknowledge that that's a sort of racist sentiment. But for some reason, when it comes to Jewish people living in Judea and Samaria, all of a sudden people become confused and people start conflating terms and things like that. So I think the issue is a lack of the promotion of Jewish civil rights in these areas, and people just willing to just sign them away or whatever for a feigned unjust and will probably definitely be a temporary, if that, peace. And I think that's the real problem. I think the problem that Jews living in this area are perceived in the world as radicals or whatever, or something like that, and
occupiers.
Right. It's really absurd though when you really take
Settler.
that and extrapolate it to its logical conclusion. It makes no sense whatsoever to say that a Jew who lives in Judea is somehow evil. That's like members of the KKK saying that blacks who live in a certain neighborhood that are inimical to society by even just being there. It's really absurd. So
yes, and the idea, nobody blinks an eye about the idea of first having to evacuate all Jews from what is supposedly supposed to be a country called Palestine that will be exclusively for Arabs, and absolutely no Jews are allowed, and nobody blinks an eye or thinks that that's apartheid or that's wrong or that's inconceivable even. I would like to see a country like say France or Canada or the US, where suddenly there is one area designated for Native American Indians, but absolutely no other Americans are allowed to live there. Or in France, if you have one area that's just certain French people, and nobody else can live there. I would like to see how people would react to that. Say, "Oh, that's racist. That's bigoted." But in the case of Israel, that's just fine. Nobody blinks an eye, thinking about the fact that in Israel, 20% of the population is Arab, most of them Muslim. We have Druze and we have Christians, but most of them are Muslims, and they're all considered Israeli Arabs. 20%, that's fine. But in Palestine, not one Jew will be allowed to live there, and that's absolutely okay for everybody. And that always boggles my mind when I hear that. And how come that is considered just and right? And how can anyone come here and say, clear all the Jews away so we can have a Jew-free Palestine? That's basically what they're saying.
Yeah. And then call it justice all in the same breath.
Call it justice and call us the occupiers, call us the settlers, and call us apartheid. Very nice. Jeremy, are you there?
Yep, I'm listening.
Okay, Jeremy, as the same question goes for you. What do you think about the Kerry peace proposal, and do you think it will succeed?
And both you and Chloe, both raised very excellent points. The Kerry peace proposal will not succeed. I personally do not believe it will succeed. Because the Palestinians, one of the key ingredients that the Israelis want in the negotiation process, that the Palestinians must recognize Israel as a land for the Jewish people, and that runs counter everything that the Palestinians truly believe. Because once you agree and acknowledge formally that Israel is a land for the Jews, therefore they basically legitimize their Nakba, the catastrophe that they preach every year. And it is true, that the issue really is not really about the land, which land belongs to, and how much of this land, how much of that land, but that it really boils down to, it's a religious warfare. They have to acknowledge, first of all, the Jewish presence in this land from biblical times to now. There's always been a Jewish presence, first of all, archaeologically, historically, biblically. You can look at every way. There's always been Jews living in this land, in a small majority, in a small way, in a major way. And that is one thing that they always fail to acknowledge. I mean, it's mind-boggling that the chief Palestinian negotiator, Saeb Erekat, says that he's like, the descendants of the Canaanites. The Canaanites were idol worshippers. The Canaanites were not Muslim. In fact, Islam would condemn and slaughter the Canaanites because they believed in multiple gods. And they're from ancient times, even before like the Jewish people arrived on the scene. The other crazy thing that no one seems to condemn is when they make outrageous statements such as Jesus was a Palestinian. I mean, last time I checked, Jesus was a Jew. If you read the Gospel, he was Jewish. And so all these outrageous statements just prove that they can't and won't accept any Jewish form of presence in the land of Israel. And that, I mean, among all the other issues, which the Palestinians are not united. Mahmoud Abbas is not the legitimate ruler of the Palestinians because they haven't had an election for many years already. Who would actually sign the document if there really is a peace agreement, done at the very end, is another big question. But it just shows that, that the Kerry peace proposal has many holes. And if you're going to just continue condemning Israel for settlement building, it will not solve the problem. And, like I always tell people, whether you're pro-settlements or anti-settlements, at the end of the day, settlements is just a building. You can knock down a building, you can destroy a building, you can move a building, but what you cannot knock down or destroy or move is you cannot knock down and destroy incitement and violence, which Palestinians teach day in and day out to their children. We've seen video footages. They never condemn terrorists that blow the Israeli, in the streets. They never, rarely they condemn Hamas or the Islamic Jihad shooting rockets from Gaza. They actually award and reward Palestinian prisoners with their families, and so they have just a cycle of incitement and violence, and that that just doesn't go away. And the issue, the key issue to a true peace is to tackle those critical issues within the Palestinian society. And only once you tackle those issues can there actually be peace. And so therefore, I don't think that the Kerry peace proposal has a chance of succeeding, and I think it's slim to none.
Yes, let's not forget the town squares and streets that they name after terrorists who have killed Jewish people, and also honor them. And they not only do they honor them, they actually encourage younger people to follow in their footsteps. We have here a gentleman called, or woman, Philistine Oli, that says that, the reason there can't be any peace is because Israel doesn't want to give up any land. Is there any land in Judea and Samaria where only Arabs live? Like, for example, Ramallah and Jenin, and what else can we put? Bethlehem. We don't want to give up any land, and yet those areas are completely Jew-free. So I'm wondering what this person is actually talking about, that we don't want to give up any land.
Pretty sure we disengaged in 2005 from Gaza.
Which we did, yes, and we disengaged in 2005 from Gaza. And please correct us if we're wrong, Chloe. Jesus not only was Jewish, but he actually died Jewish, did he not?
Yes, he did. That's how I checked. That's very true.
The notion of him being Palestinian, let's keep in mind that people who say that are usually Muslim, and Islam didn't even exist at the time. So I often ask myself when they say, "Oh, we've been around for 5,000 years," or before the Big Bang. I'm wondering, Islam is only about, it started in 670 or 640, something like that. And in the 7th century, let's just put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I am just wondering how they go back so far claiming, and I would love for somebody to come up with one little bit of proof of this kind of ancestry. Like, I can't even prove five generations ago where I come from. I wonder how these people are able to prove that 6,000 years ago their ancestors are from here. It's mind-boggling. We don't even know where we come from 2 centuries ago, let alone 5 and 10 and 6. I mean, I have no idea. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I come from, I don't know. No clue.
I mean, Michelle, it's true.
Really. These claims that they come up with, oh, we've been here for 500 years. Really? Okay, can you prove anything? I'll take anything. Anything. A piece of fabric. Anything. I worked in the archaeological excavations when I first moved here because I was very curious to see. And I worked for the Israel Antiquity Authority. And when I was working there, there's a certain law. It's not really a spoken law, but for every archaeological excavation, there has to be a certain number of Israelis and Israeli Arabs working in the excavation. And I thought it was all about like being fair,
Mm-hmm.
this many Arabs, in comparison to this many Jews that come from different cities. But one of the ladies I worked with let me in on a little secret, and she said it really doesn't have much to do with that. She said what it has to do with is when we dig underground, we start finding evidence of Judaism throughout the ages in Israel. We want them there to see it.
Mm-hmm.
So they can never come and say, "Oh,
they planted it there," or like some of the things that come out of the PA when they find excavations and they say that the Zionists sneaked in there at last night and planted a giant menorah there. Apparently.
Yes, exactly. And so we have them right there so they could see what we excavated. So whether they want to tell the truth or not. They can go out and lie and say, I didn't see anything, or yes, it was planted. But in their heart of hearts, they know that we've picked out menorahs, we've picked out all kinds of evidence of Jewish history throughout the ages for at least a minimum of 3,000 years. And they could never come and say, oh, well, that doesn't exist. On the other hand, something that says Palestine in their imaginary way of speaking has never existed. We found Byzantine, we found Ottoman, we found Mamluks, you name it. But there was never something that you could say, you know what, that's kind of like Palestinian, so to speak.
It's true.
Maybe, yes, it's absolutely true. So I know who was here, and it wasn't always Jews, but there's always Jewish presence at one place or another. And that much I can tell you from personal experience. PLO will never accept Israel as a Jewish state. Oh, well, we know that. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out, Philistine.
I mean, look, but the craziness of the craziness of this peace process is that even just from the very beginning, Israel once again had to sacrifice something to just start speaking to the Palestinians. And what did we have to sacrifice? We had to release cold-blooded terrorists and back out into the open for them to go back into their families, that the Palestinians were parading them left and right, and Mahmoud Abbas, congratulated them once again. But now why did Israel have to release these cold-blooded killers? It was just to enter negotiations with the Palestinians. The Palestinians have never offered to sacrifice or do something to help, advance the peace process, and that is, integral. They say they want East Jerusalem as their capital. Can they, guarantee us that even if we give them East Jerusalem, we would have security? I mean, that is a big issue. And we even know now that there's been Hamas cells that have been busted, and that the IDF has went into the West Bank and taken out, Islamic radicals, in the West Bank. And this is already now before there even is a chance of a state called Palestine, And so the security element is integral for this as well, besides their distortion of historical facts and reality, which they're wonderful at doing. I mean, even from the very beginning, the Palestinians have always sided with evil. Even before there was the state of Israel, they sided with Adolf Hitler. Why? To kick the Jews out. There's a famous picture of the Mufti of Jerusalem, Khaja Amin al-Husseini, talking to Adolf Hitler. I'm sure they weren't talking about how to bake cookies. It's more like how to bake cookies.
Yeah, we can go further back.
And people should, take that into factor, that the Palestinians have never really contributed anything positive. Throughout their whole history. Jews have been in exile, for thousands of years. We have never resorted to suicide bombings, to massive slaughter, to the praising of our, fellow, natives who were living in the land, death or anything. No, in fact, it was the opposite. They said that we were stealing organs and all that, and we killed Jesus during the Christian lands. The final thing I wanted to mention, the important thing is that one must also understand Islam in order to understand the peace process, or the lack of a peace process. The Jewish people and the Christians, according to Islam, are called the dhimming, or second-hand citizens. That the Muslims are the highest, the official rulers of the land, because they believe in Allah and His Prophet Muhammad. But the rest, the Christians and the Jews, were spared from death because we believe in one God, and also the Jews were the people of the book, according to the Quran. But Muslims should always be the rulers of the land, especially a holy land. And Saudi Arabia, just like Israel, are considered sacred land, according to in the Quran. And God forbid, Jews have any control over this land. And that is very, very important to know and understand is, how the Jews were treated by the Arab rulers when Jews were living in Arab territories pre-state of Israel. And also what Islam says about Jews in Israel. Now, by the way, the Quran does mention, which many democrats fail to mention, the Quran does mention Israel belongs to the Jewish people. It never once mentions, Jerusalem. In the Bible, Jerusalem is mentioned thousands of times, and that, Jerusalem belongs to the Jewish people. Jerusalem is the undivided capital of the Jewish people. King David, founded it. King Solomon built the temple, and Herod built the second temple.
That's right.
But the issue is that the Quran, it does not mention Jerusalem at all. Al-Quds in Arabic means the holy. It doesn't mean Jerusalem. It means holy. It means it's a holy area. That's all it means. And this is what aggravates me. This is what aggravates me about the John Kerry peace process. Once again, they're focusing on all of what Israel does or doesn't do, whatever the Palestinians do or don't do. They have carte blanche. They have incite and cause chaos. Say death to Jews, death to Israel, and that Jews don't belong here. The final thing also is that the Muslims also believe in if they do sign an agreement like with Hamas, they believe in a hudna, a ceasefire. Not a ceasefire because they want peace in the end, but a ceasefire so that they can rearm and that they can effectively destroy the enemy. And that is exactly what Muhammad did to the Jewish tribes in Saudi Arabia when he was trying to conquer the land because the Jews didn't view him as the prophet. And that is exactly what the Muslims did to their enemies, is that they performed these ceasefires under the tent of peace. And then when the Muslims were well equipped and fully armed and knew how to defeat them strategically, they wiped them off the planet. And so that is my other question, is if the Palestinians really do want peace and they actually signed the peace document, is it truly a peace document or just one step closer of deceiving the world and annihilating the Jews? I mean, as Netanyahu said at the UN, even though he's referring to Rouhani with this statement, they're wolf in sheep's clothing, I mean, appearances can be deceiving, and their words are especially deceiving as well.
Just real quick, I actually happen to have history here. My grandparents were born under Ottoman rule. My grandfather was born in Syria, and my grandmother was born in Hebron. And my grandfather moved from Syria to Hebron, and that's where they married and lived. And I can tell you that even then, they weren't harassed by the Ottoman Turks. They were actually harassed by the Arabs that lived there. So much so. There were pogroms. There was one also in 1920 and 22. And they moved away earlier than that and went to live in Alexandria, Egypt. So this isn't new. I mean, there was no Israel at the time. There was no excuse. It was simply because they were Jewish and they were living there, and that was enough for them. And this is the problem that we have, is that it's not about land. It's about not wanting Jewish people to be here, period. It has nothing to do with anything else. They just cannot stand the idea of having Jewish people present. And many times over, we've heard that annihilating us. It's just the beginning. It's not the end. It's the beginning of getting rid of us. So it's one step closer to getting rid of us. And that's why we've seen maps of if the entire Judea and Samaria and the Green Line, what would happen is that it would be so close to Tel Aviv and the area that they would be very easily be able to throw rockets. It's only 9 miles. It's only 9 miles from the Green Line to the Mediterranean Sea, and what would happen is that they would begin to attack us, and we would have problems with that, and from Gaza as well. And we just can't even fathom the idea of doing that.
No, it's true. By the way, you're 100% right. That is very true, and that's extremely important to understand and to grasp that concept. That not only that if they gain control of Judea and Samaria, they gain control of the highlands, and that they will have, the ability, if they want, to smuggle in rockets. By the way, and that is, of course, if the IDF does not control the Jordan Valley, that if the Jordan Valley becomes like an easy, wasteland for goods and illegal weaponry to be to also control the Jordan Valley. The IDF must remain a presence there. The final issue is that this is also the worst time to talk peace when the entire neighborhood is literally descending into chaos. We have Hezbollah becoming stronger. Syria is literally becoming into a bloodbath between Bashar Assad's army massacring his people, which, by the way, I don't see John Kerry talking so much about. But apparently when there's a few buildings in Judea Samaria, that should be an international outcry. But when Bashar Assad, butchers, his own people and throws a bomb on a kindergarten, that's okay. It's not too bad.
Yeah, over 100,000 people so far. Chloe, yes. Philistine Oil here, Ollie, sorry, says that the PLO will never accept Israel as a Jewish state. And the reason he offers is because that is saying no to the Arabs who live there will have any because I'm actually what he's trying to say is if it's they won't recognize it because Jewish people will not give rights to anybody other than Jewish citizens. Can you please elaborate on the situation of Arabs living in Israel? And would that be the case? Does what he say hold water?
No, of course not. Of course not. Israel has a 20.5% of Arabs and Arab citizens in its population. They have full civil rights. They have the right to vote. They have religious rights. They have freedom of movement. They serve in the Knesset. They serve in all manner of occupations, same as their Jewish counterparts. They have full-fledged rights, and there's absolutely no basis for that accusation.
And what about their salaries? Do they get, for the same job, do they get paid exactly the same?
Same job, same salaries. I think I think I'm interested in asking this person where they're getting their sources from, or if they're just making it up arbitrarily as they go along, because that is totally unfounded and completely inaccurate.
Right. And let's go further. Let's take it a step further. Tell us a little bit about the Arab women, Muslim women in particular, who live in Israel, their rights. Tell us about their rights on how to dress and do they have to wear the garb that is required of them in other Muslim countries where it's enforced, or are they free to do whatever they want?
No, and I think curiously enough, I'd say that Israel is the freest country in the Middle East for Muslim women, and that's the irony of the situation. Muslim women can dress in any way they desire. They have total freedoms of dress and freedoms of religion and things like that, and freedoms to live out their religion in the way they see fit, and it doesn't have to be dictated to them by a cleric or a hierarchy of men sitting somewhere pontificating over texts and trying to mandate to them how to dress and how to act and how to move. And you would think that the people who purport to represent human rights and the people who claim to um, to advocate on behalf of human rights and on behalf of morality would tell the truth and praise Israel for these human rights. But of course they don't, because in point of fact, human rights is not their MO. It's not their objective. Their objective is instead to denigrate Israel and to moreover deny Jews their civil rights. And so we see this playing out not only in certain illegitimate criticisms of Israel, but also on college campuses when you have groups like Students for Justice in Palestine and people who put on Israel Apartheid Week, who claim to represent the civil rights of Palestinian Arabs when they could care less about how they're being treated in countries like Lebanon and Syria and Jordan and Egypt and elsewhere. As I mentioned earlier, these countries have laws on the books that deliberately keep them from being integrated into society, that deny them rights, that deny them access to housing, that deny them rights to certain jobs, that keep their wages lower than the rest of their other Arab counterparts, and they treat them with disdain because they are Palestinian Arabs, and they do it on purpose, in part to keep them sort of living at the clutch, but also to make Israel look bad. But these people who claim that they're students for justice in Palestine or students for justice for Palestinians do not care about Palestinians at all, because that is not their objective. These people work with such groups as Hamas, and they will tell you this. They will they've admitted it to me, to my face on college campuses, that they have no problem with Hamas. And yet how can you have no problem with Hamas when Hamas persecutes its own people? How can you claim that you are for the promotion of the dignity of the Palestinian Arabs, and you are siding with organizations that do not care? Yeah. Not even Hamas, but also the PLO, of course, which is corrupt, which jails its own people for speaking out against them on Facebook, let alone in person. So I just think it's a tragedy, because we're in this paradigm where people claim to act on behalf of people when they don't actually care about them at all the while denigrating Israel, the country that actually does try to foster human rights and actually does try to advocate on behalf of all its citizens, not only its Jewish citizens, but all its citizens. And we see that conclusively in its treatment of the Arab population.
Thank you. Not to mention that, yes, they support terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah and claim to be human rights activists. It's quite funny, actually, but no mention of Assad and no mention of it.
No flotilla to Syria.
No, yeah, no flotilla to Syria. No, that's not necessary. Keep on killing your people, and that's absolutely fine. It's just, but Israel just built a new community of 500 people. Let's get that flotilla going. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes, and so
I'm not sure
bearing in mind everything that we've just spoken about, Chloe, I guess we can safely conclude that Israel does not have a peace partner at this point in time.
Not at all.
Right.
You have a crazy terrorist organization in Gaza, and then you have a more moderate terrorist organization, and the only real difference is, I think, between the PLO and the PA and Hamas is that the PA the PA believes in terrorism, but they've I think devoted much of their efforts more to rhetoric and things like that, which in turn foster terrorism, whereas Hamas is much more open and much more overt about their objectives. But they really are the same. I think the PLO is much more good at apparently tricking the world and tricking the West into believing that it's moderate and saint and the epitome of everything good and just in this world. But no,
what's really incredible to me, above and beyond all of that, is that Mahmoud Abbas's term was for 5 years, and it's ended, if I'm not mistaken, about 6 years ago. And yet he is recognized as the leader of the Fatah organization. And nobody bats an eyelash about the idea that they're actually dealing with somebody. There hasn't been a vote. And he just keeps his position, whether the people like it or not. And for some reason, everybody thinks that that's fine. the first thing I would require before even addressing this man is, can you please have some votes so we could see who the people actually want to represent them?
Right.
But there's no such thing that ever occurs in these countries, and that's perfectly acceptable to the UN and to the EU, and and it's all fine and it's all good.
And I just want to say something right quick about the EU, because I find this quite contradictory. The EU is notorious for being anti so-called settlements, as I'm sure you're well aware. But I think it's curious that many elites in the EU have no problem with buying vacation rental properties in Cyprus, which is currently occupied by a foreign imperialistic power, namely Turkey. So I think it's interesting that they have they cry over Jews being in their ancestral historic homeland, but they have no problem with actually buying vacation rental property in occupied territory.
And what about the occupied Sahara? From the Moroccans have occupied Sahara, and nobody ever speaks about that. And I watch French news, and I see sometimes programs about this, but nobody ever discusses it. It's no big deal because it's not Israel.
Right.
Let's we started touching a little bit on that, and I would like to go back to talking about it. What are the BDS's intentions, and are they really effective? Jeremy, let's start with you.
Yes, about the BDS?
Yes.
Okay. Well, right before I mentioned the BDS, I just want to mention one comment about the Israeli apartheid that people around the world claim Israel is. People should remember that the former Israeli president Moshe Katsav, when he was sentenced to jail on sexual charges, it was an Arab judge who sentenced him. It wasn't a Jewish judge, it was an Arab. And, my girlfriend is from South Africa. And I heard the stories, I haven't been to South Africa, but I heard the stories from the apartheid time period. And when blacks were truly segregated from the rest of the white population, and they were shipped on separate buses and set in separate rooms, that is not the case in Israel. There is no separate Arab buses. There is no separate rooms. Arabs can flourish just as well as Jews can flourish. When I mean Arabs, I'm talking to Muslim Arabs, Christian Arabs, Druze. I'm talking about every university. The first 2 weeks, the first girl who had a crush on me was an Arab woman. She was a student. She was studying psychology. To this day, I'm still friends with her, and I think she was Christian Arab. But I saw that her friends were Muslims. They had the hijab and all that. And they were laughing, happy, smiling, talking to Israelis, eating in the same cafeteria that the rest of the apartheid Israelis were eating in, studying in the same classes. That the idea of apartheid is completely false and inaccurate when it comes to Israel. There is no apartheid at all in Israel. The Arabs have just as much rights as the Jews. They can scream and they can complain in the Knesset.
And they do.
Yes, and they do. The Canadian Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, came and he made his speeches to the Knesset. And the Arab Parliament, exactly, he starts going off on the water shortages and how we're discriminating against the Arab population. If this was truly an apartheid, the guy would not even be in the Knesset. Period. He would be, I don't know, like cleaning a Jewish person's clothing or something.
Yes, but Jeremy, you know that a lot of the people, when they speak about apartheid and you point all these things out to them, which I have, they say, no, we're not talking about the Arabs in Israel. That there's no apartheid in Israel. There's apartheid in Judea and Samaria, where it's supposed to be Palestine. And I say, oh, really? Please explain to me why it's only over there. And they say, well, you've got your walls and you've got your checkpoints. And a person can't
tell people that the Arabs are the ones who build the settlement houses. That actually we provide them the jobs to earn the money so that they can actually have a better life in their so-called Palestine, in Ramallah and Vietnam. You know, a big issue that many people around the Middle East and around the world should actually focus on, instead of, you know, with all the nasty things Israel does to the poor Palestinians, is actually what the Arab world does to the poor Christian world in the Middle East, which, by the way, is disappearing at a very fast rate. The Christians are like the next big exodus out of the Middle East. There is virtually no Christian presence in Bethlehem and Nazareth, which is the birthplace of Christianity. You know, the Copts in Egypt are fleeing in Iraq. There's virtually no Christians anymore. I mean, you know, when we talk about apartheid, I would say that the world should be focused on the Arabs' treatment of you know, people who are not Muslims, because that really is the issue. And even in Ramallah itself, you know, in the so-called Judea and Samaria, you know, that they want to be called their, you know, Palestinian state. You know, the reason why there's a security fence is for security reasons. There's been no suicide bombings since that security fence has been up. Sadly, you know, we had to, you know, separate, you know, both sides with a physical barrier, but it was purely for, you know, security reasons, to save both lives, Jewish lives and Arab lives. You know, Israel will do whatever it can to uphold, you know, honesty, you know, truth, freedom, you know, liberty. You know, in the Bible, it says, it stresses, Jews must, you know, value life over death. In Islam, that's not the case. You must value death over life. And if you die, and if you're a man, you get 70 virgin women. If you're a woman, you remain young and beautiful in the afterlife. You know, there is no concept like that in Judaism. Life is much more important. You know, we value, you know, a flourishing civilization and, you know, making a society flourish. But that is not the case with Islam, and you can see it when they give money to the suicide bomber families. That it's you know, that the whole mentality is distorted in a very ugly and brutal and genocidal sort of way, and that's what I always tell people.
Up until 2001, there were no walls and there were no checkpoints and there were no barriers and there was none of that. They brought it upon themselves when they started with the terrorist attacks, and so I can't even understand why people can't see that. I mean, we need to protect ourselves. We need to protect our tourists, and that's the only reason for the checkpoints. There is no other reason to put them up. Had there been no terrorist attacks, there would be no need for walls or checkpoints. It's the same thing. Gaza has been free since 2005, and all they do is throw Qassam rockets, launch them at South Israel, and yet they want us to lift the blockade. I mean, I don't understand. I have a different mentality. If I had a piece of land, such choice land on the Mediterranean, I would have turned it into a second Riviera, and I would have attracted tourists instead of focusing on throwing rockets at us. I don't understand the mentality. Values are completely different. They care more about land than they do about developing it. It's like, just give me the land, but not thinking about. I would have never thrown a Qassam rocket. I would have just built a beautiful city. This is before the blockade. There wasn't a blockade up one time. Turned it into a beautiful vacation spot, but they just think differently. They don't have this concept of improving.
But you know, I mean, I must say, you know, to really try. And by the way, it's true that the Gaza, you know, had the most beautiful beaches along the coastline, even beautiful than Tel Aviv.
It still does. Yeah.
And it still does. Sadly, women will probably not be there wearing bikinis. I think it probably, have, rocks thrown at them or bullets. Pick one.
That's the problem.
But the sad part is, and this really is sad, and I think this should be stressed. Is that when you talk about religion, Islam and Judaism share so much more in common than Judaism and Christianity. That we really are cousin religions, and it is truly a shame that that this conflict has erupted to such animosity from the Islamic world to the Jewish world. Because if they actually got along with us, then we could really make the Middle East bloom and prosper. If you look back biblically, the Islamic nation was formed out of Ishmael. The Jews were formed out of Isaac. The same grandfather, different grandmother. We have Sarah, they have Hagar, but the problem is that one side chose to remain during their tribal barbaric ways, and the other side flourished and became enlightened throughout the years.
Yeah, we will have to touch on that subject at a later interview, because that's kind of going a little bit out of the focus of what we're discussing today. But we can discuss that. I never understood how Ishmael is associated with Islam when it occurred about 5,000 years before. But that's a whole other discussion.
It's true. You're right.
We don't have a lot more time, so let's just try to come back to the subject, and I'm going to ask one last question from both of you, and then we'll have to end because it's already 8:17. And we'll start with you, Chloe. What is another alternative to creating a Palestinian state in Judea and Samaria?
Well, many Israeli academics have actually been developing different theories. Some have developed the theory of a one-state solution, which they contend is actually quite compatible with a democratic Jewish state. And they derive this conclusion by looking at the demographics of the situation in Judea and Samaria, which they say has heretofore been conflated. The numbers, meaning Arab birth rates, have been conflated by such organizations as the Palestinian Authority. For example, Caroline Glick has a new book coming out in March. I think it's called The Israeli Solution, that addresses these issues. I know that Nadia Matar and the Women in Green have been promoting this idea for quite some time. Can it happen? Practically, I'd like to think it could happen. In terms of actually realizing something like this, though, I think that first some preliminary actions would have to be taken. I think that ultimately the UNRWA, which is the UN body that is specifically for quote-unquote Palestinian refugees, I think it would have to be abolished because, as I've mentioned earlier, it creates a sense of victimhood and perpetuity in the Palestinian Arab community and other countries. And it fosters a culture of victimhood in them while sanctioning discrimination against them on the part of their Arab brothers and sisters discriminate against them. And I think we have to integrate these people into their own societies. And I think that has to be handled. I think that, and maybe this is just my opinion, but I think that ultimately Hamas and the PLO are going to have to somehow be dismantled, just because the PLO has from its origins represented an organization that was very much devoted to the destruction of Israel. So I think that's something that's going to happen.
Just 1 second, please. Please. Robin. Hi. You need to put in your earphones, otherwise everything echoes here. Okay, and we won't have a lot of time because we're almost done. Can you turn off your mic so you get set up? Thank you very much.
I don't know how.
Okay, well, it's echoing and that's disrupting the entire conversation.
Okay. Oh, wrong one.
Okay, can you turn off your, can you come out of Vonvo and come back when you're set up? Thank you very much. Because everybody's waiting. Robin?
There we go.
Okay, sorry, Chloe, what were you saying?
Yes, I was just saying about how there are certain preliminary actions that need to take place on the ground. Also, I think it's important to stress that you're not going to find a solution to this conflict for, I think, at least the next 50 years, because you're dealing with a generation, and really multiple generations, who have been raised to hate Jewish people, cultivated from their youth, and that's where it's difficult to, I think, really find a long-term solution that's going to ameliorate that situation. You're not going to be able to ameliorate that situation just by changing, building things on land and things like that. I think it's going to take a much more sort of re-education program that's going to have to foster cooperation between Arabs and Jews, and that's going to be hard to do when you have, like I said, multiple external parties that aren't interested in seeing that happen. But there are various solutions that have been proposed. Martin Sherman has policy prescriptions, which I personally adhere to, so you may be interested, for those viewers, may be interested in checking those out. I know that Mordecai Kedar proposed the 8-state solution, which is based on, I think, the delineation of different Arab tribes in the territories in question, so that's another solution that's, I think, interesting. There are multiple things that are being posited and contended right now, and it's a shame that, I think, even in some cases in the pro-Israel world, people are saying that the 2-state solution is the only viable solution. We've been dealing with this framework for quite a while now, and people are saying that those who disagree with the 2-state solution are apparently illegitimate in their opinions. For example, J Street is an organization that purports to be pro-Israel, but actually isn't. But that's one of the organizations that contends that, while simultaneously, ironically, saying that they believe in the free exchange of ideas and things of that nature, but of course they will not deal with ideas that are different to theirs. So I think there are multiple ideas being developed, which is a good thing. It's good that people are sharing them, and I think it needs to happen more often.
Okay, thank you very much, Chloe. And what about you, Jeremy? Is there an alternative to to creating a Palestinian state in Judea and Samaria?
Yeah, well, first I just want to say that the idea of a 2-state solution is always very weird, because just the name 2-state solution is not reality. There's 3 states. There's Gaza, there's the West Bank, Judea, Samaria, and then there's Israel proper. So I never understood, when any American administration uses 2 states. But the only way I see it is 2 possible potential ways is either, like Mordechai Kedar, the professor at Bar Ilan, an Islamic scholar, he said that the Arabs should have their own selective, communities with political control, but Israel maintains full security control of the territories, but they will have, their own legitimate legal, zones, so to speak, and or through a Jordanian influence, confederate, have Jordan help to establish, the Arabs living in Judea and Samaria. That's another thing. The last 2 things I just want to mention is, the world, including John Kerry, should talk about the Temple Mount. Temple Mount, should be used as a place for worship for all religions, not Islamic dominance over that place where Jews have no right to even utter even a syllable of a prayer, unless if you want to cause World War III. That should be completely dismantled. It should be freedom for all worships, and I do emphasize all worships. And B, if John Kerry cares so much about peace, he should be really making sure that Iran does not get the bomb, because under Obama administration, it seems as if Iran is rapidly getting the bomb, which will severely derail any form of possible peace in the Middle East, let alone between Israelis and Palestinians, or Israelis and the rest of the Arab world.
Okay, thank you. My answer to that, is the big no-no answer, which, first of all, I never thought of Judea and Samaria as either occupied or not part of Israel, because as far as I'm concerned, Jordan was supposed to be Palestine, and all of Israel as we know it today, including Judea and Samaria, was supposed to be Israel. Somewhere along the line, we lost track of that, but and nobody dares to even bring that as a proposal, and I'm dumbfounded, because if I were in the Knesset, or if I were a politician, now I wouldn't stop with that. I'm not saying all of Jordan should be Palestine, but Jordan is about, if I'm not mistaken, about 7 times the size of Israel. So maybe one part of that, maybe even the size of Judea and Samaria, let's keep it secret. There are more so-called Palestinians in Jordan than there are actually in Judea and Samaria, in this huge myth that there are 2.5 million so-called Palestinian Arabs in Judea and Samaria is completely false. At best, there is 1.5 million, at best. And so there are a lot more. 80% of Jordanians proclaim themselves to be the so-called, actually mathematically it doesn't even make any sense, considering there were maybe 500,000 Arabs in all of Israel in 1948. So how they ended up being several million is beyond my comprehension, unless they have 60 children each, which is quite possible. But and also right of return and such. Nobody under the age of 65 is refugee. Nobody. There's nowhere in history do you proclaim refugees in the 2nd and 3rd and 4th and 6th generation. It's just, it doesn't exist except for here. So my solution is asking King Abdallah, can you please let go of a small area of your huge and barren country to create a Palestinian state? And people say, oh, you want to do a transfer. No, I didn't say that. I didn't say I want to do a transfer. I said, considering there are more of the so-called Palestinian Arab, and as we know, they only started calling themselves that when Israel became a country. Before that, they hated the idea of being associated and being called Palestinian. They always referred to themselves as Arabs, and suddenly they're Palestinians that have a Jordanian flag minus the star. And so I'm saying, why don't you negotiate with him? Why do they have to negotiate with us all the time? Why can't they negotiate with, and I would propose that, go negotiate with King Abdallah. He's got a much larger country, and many more of the so-called proclaimed Arabs can go live there, and all those supposed refugees can go live there, and any Arab who lives in Judea and Samaria, or even in Israel, who wishes to go live there, well, hasta la vista, and that's it. I mean, and over there are no Jews, so you won't have this problem of having to vacate Jewish people, and they can all live with their own religion and their own way of thinking and their own culture. The Arabs here claim to have a specific culture. Well, their way of speaking is no different than Jordanian. Their food is no different than Jordanian or Egyptian. Their way of dancing and their way they dress is no different. I've seen Jordanian and Syrian dances, and they're exactly the same like the Arabs here. They're exactly the same people. This is not about land. This is about conquest. It's very different. This is not about claiming, they pushed us out of here. First of all, yes, some of them lived here and had houses here, and now they live in Jordan or they live in Lebanon, and as if they are the only people in the world that have ever been transferred or have ever been pushed away or have ever been chased away. The entire world is a change in demographics. In Europe, I mean, France used to be Gaul. There were Gaulois. I mean, what happened to those people? Nobody talks about that. Oh, that was a long time ago. Well, what about Pakistan? There were Sikhs and Hindus living in Pakistan. They were all evacuated over to the Punjab. You never hear them whining and complaining that they want to go back to Pakistan. They made a life for themselves elsewhere. But these are the only people, because I think it's a people who just like to suffer. That's what I see. They throw Qassam rockets so we can reply and have a war. I think they just enjoy suffering. This is what I see from them. They don't want to develop. They just want to suffer. They just want to live in perpetual suffering. And they do everything in their power to make it impossible to live happily. That's what I see from them. Yes, sure.
I think with regards to that last comment, I think it's certainly the government's in question, but I think it's very rewarding. I think the people suffer more than the governments, but for the governments to receive billions of dollars from taxpayers from American and European governments, it's very rewarding, and there's an incentive to sort of perpetuate this idea that they're the victims, because the more they perpetuate this idea that they're the victims, the more the world pressures Israel, and the more money we send to them. And of course, the leaders are stealing billions of dollars from their people and putting it in bank accounts and Swiss bank accounts and things like that. So I think, I really actually feel sorry for the people, because they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Their own leadership doesn't care about them, has never really cared about them. The Arab world has never historically cared about them from the onset. I mean, I think everyone should read, if anyone's interested, a book called Palestine Betrayed by Ephraim Karsh, which illustrates conclusively that the Arab world has never cared about these people. And so they're taught to hate from their youth, and then the people who teach them to hate steal money from them. And so then they look around and they see that they're in some cases in abject poverty, and they wonder why they're in abject poverty, and then their leaders are telling them that it's all because of Israel's fault. So their leaders steal from them, they persecute them, and then they blame Israel for it. So it's really an unfortunate situation, and the cycle continues over and over again. And it's I hate to say this, but it's perpetuated by people who are ignorant of the facts on the ground, like I would say John Kerry, and like previous Western governments, who try to insert their way of thinking into the society.
I see. Thank you very much, Chloe. Robin, you came in a little bit late. Yes, absolutely. Robin, thank you for joining us.
I'll try to do it quick.
Yes,
it's Islamic cultural war, and they have a horizontal culture. We have a vertical culture. You guys can read the book that I posted there. And there's no possibility of peace until their culture changed. And in their culture, they destroy each other. It's a horizontal culture with violence causing the balance. The thing will change, mechanisms will change, and people are the bone to the side, strong and capable. And that's what we a couple of years back with it. That spring, people what the presidents of the Jewish organizations as well, they're behaving like capos, or the Jews that sent us to the Nazis. And the leadership of the Jews, some sort of or something like that. I don't know what the Islam cultural war, and they don't read the books. It's a problem. And that's about it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Robin, for these words.
It took me an hour to get in. It was real difficult. I tried lots of different ways. Finally got fed up, and then I finally tried to get back in again. That's why I was late. They just wouldn't let me in.
It's okay. Thank you very much, Robin. We will surely have more of these discussions, and I'll be happy to invite you to one of them.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Chloe,
sorry about the speaker thing.
It's okay. No problem. Thank you. Chloe, thank you very much.
Thank you for having
Are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I thank you very much for your time and for your sharing with us your knowledge about this situation here. And I encourage you to continue your fine work. And when you come to Israel to visit next time, I would be very happy and pleased to meet you in person.
Likewise.
Thank you very much. Jeremy, are you there?
I also meet you too.
I would love to meet you both. We'll definitely try to arrange.
Oh, well, let's do dinner.
Maybe you guys can join me on the ranch if I get funds for the project.
Okay.
Trying to help all the ranches. They got European cattle that don't work in Israel, so I'm bringing Texas Longhorn cattle, and the ranches are being attacked by jackals, wolves,